Hello, my name is Mark Tybee, and I would like to welcome you to the Caregiver Series. The Caregiver Series is a program that's designed to provide insight and hopefully answer some questions to those of you who may be caring for a loved one at home. You know, at the beginning of the 20th century, it was pretty common for someone to be at home most of the day to be able to care for an ailing parent or grandma, grandpa. You know, life was slower back then, and now today in the 21st century, well, my goodness, you know, life is just moving at such a rapid pace, and there's so many demands upon us that when it comes time to having to take care of a loved one, we oftentimes have looked to facilities, nursing homes, assisted livings. But with rising costs of care and even the quality of care being so uncertain, it's really falling upon many family and friends to take care of those people at home. Well, that truly is a sacrifice, and it can be overwhelming at times. You know, most people can probably take care of somebody, a day or two, you know, maybe even a week. But what happens when the week rolls over into a month, and then the month, multiple months, and then a year or even more? It can be exhausting. And I would like to provide perhaps some insight and even questions to some of you that right now you don't even know what questions to ask. It is a sacrifice, and at the end of each video, I'm going to have my email posted so that you can email any questions, any comments that you might have. My prayer is that if this is a value to you, or perhaps you know somebody that might be encouraged by such a program, please feel free to forward it to them. And so it will be weekly, and I do appreciate the time that you've taken to watch this, and may it be a blessing to you. God bless you. Hello. Thanks for joining me today. Today's broadcast is entitled The Reluctant Volunteer. You know, at some point in time when you face the decision of being a caregiver for your mom, your dad, spouse, a significant other, somebody that you really care about, it's not something that we really think about, you know, long time in advance. When the challenge faces us and we're kind of looking around to see, you know, what are the options, and we realize that oftentimes we're it. You know, it can be it can truly be an awakening. Back in the summer of 1998, my mother had already been in a resident group home for dementia. She was with 9 other women in a resident community, and they were taking care of her, I thought, doing a pretty good job. She had been living, of course, with my dad for a number of years, and he had just about wore himself out taking care of her. As it was at the time to where, you know, she would get up in the middle of the night and want to go shopping. She'd be in her pajamas, but wearing her dress shoes and her purse in hand, and was looking to go out the front door. Mom had Alzheimer's from probably 1992 until 2000. And so when we came into the picture, we had been living in Maine and had moved back to Oklahoma in January of 97. And so we were seeing Mom frequently, would take our children who were small at that time to see her. And so for the next year and a half, we would visit her in the resident facility. And then one day we got a phone call saying that the state had come and shut it down, and they had moved my mother and the other women to various nursing homes. Well, we got to see where my mother was, and it wasn't a bad place. The problem is that it was a busy place, a rather full place, and they put my mother with 3 other women. And when you have a loved one with dementia or Alzheimer's, you realize very quickly that they cannot speak for themselves. They cannot tell you what they need. They can't really tell you oftentimes what they want or don't want. And so we saw my mother begin to go downhill rather rapidly. We're talking about in a number of days. One day I went over to get her out of bed, and I pulled the sheets back, and she had nothing on. There was some oatmeal or some cream of wheat sitting on her breakfast tray that hadn't even been touched. And you know, I'm talking to my dad about this. I've got a couple of sisters. We were all conferring on what do we do? And knowing that she was in a nursing home was going to be a substantial expense to my father, and for the quality of care that she was receiving, Honestly, we didn't think she'd probably survive much more than a month. It was at that time that I realized that my sister lives in California. My other sister, she had her hands full. And my father was exhausted. It was like, well, it's either my wife, Sandy, and I, or it's going to be here. And so we prayed about it. I mean, we seriously prayed about it. To be honest with you, I'd never seen my mother without clothes. And I know that may sound kind of selfish, but it was an issue I had to deal with because I realized that we were going to have to do everything for her. She was now at the place to where she wasn't walking on her own anymore. She could eat finger foods, and she could look at you and she could utter a few nonsensical words. There were a few moments where she might have some lucidity, but she was utterly dependent upon 24/7 care. And my wife and I at the time, we had a house cleaning business, and I was working part-time as a pastor in the church locally. And so we actually had time that we could make it work. But I knew that we would need help financially. And so we prayed about it, and I talked to Dad, and I said, Dad, I said, if you will subsidize Mom's care for about half of what you'd be paying to this nursing home, I believe that we can do it. We'll give it a shot. And so it was a Sunday. We brought her home. We had everything prepared for her already. I can't quite remember how we got the hospital bed, but we had one. And so we brought her into her home. She'd actually never seen our home before. We'd only been living there since '97. And so we brought her into her house, and like I said, she was able to sit at the dining room table and eat finger foods. And then that evening, it was a Sunday, and I told my wife and kids, I said, you go ahead and go to the service. I'm going to stay home, just kind of help get her acclimated, to being here in the house. And so she was in bed, and I love my mother and would always want to honor her memory. But just to get the point across to you, that which I greatly feared came upon me. I mean, she had been drinking some chocolate Ensure over the last couple of days and had not really had any movement down below, if you know what I mean. And I'm telling you, that night, that which I really had anxiety with, it came upon me. And it was my baptism in that moment, that Sunday evening. And there was no way I was going to wait for my wife to get home to take care of it. So, I changed and cleaned my mother up and spoke to her and asked her, to forgive me, and that I just didn't think that she'd want to wait. And that was the beginning of an 18-month relationship that we would have that was quite unique. Had I been told that my mother would be living with us for 18 months, I'm not quite sure how I would have handled that in the beginning. But I have no regret to this day. If somebody asked me, would you do it again? I'd say it was a sacrifice, but yes, I would do it again. To me, one of the most important things, and I share this with you, one of the most important things that you will have when you look back upon what you have done in caring for your loved one is that you'll have no regrets. That to me is so important. Years down the road, you'll be able to look back, and you'll look back with a smile and say, you know what? I have no regrets. I went the extra mile. I went the extra mile with God's grace, and it will require God's grace, I tell you that much. And I thank my wife so much because I believe, to be totally honest with you, she did far more than I did. But it took a team. It really did. Our house is split level, so we've got kind of like 3 different levels. And unfortunately, the bathrooms are in the top and the bottom. And my mother was on the middle level where the living room is. And so twice a week, I don't think we did it more than twice a week, we would kind of pick her up on each side and carry her downstairs and put her on the toilet and then in the shower. And I'll tell you one thing, if you're not familiar with people with dementia, I don't know what it is, whether it's the texture or the temperature, because we made sure it was comfortable. They do not like water. And she was definitely not unique in that regard. And so, there are times when she would utter certain words that we weren't quite used to hearing. And I hear it from so many people so frequently. I never thought I'd hear those words coming from Mom and Dad. But when they're provoked, you'll just make sure that you're a good arm's length away. They may even be swinging at you. But I understood the situation, and I was not going to take it personally. I certainly understood what was going on, and we just extended her the grace that she needed, and we received the grace that we needed to be able to, to take care of her. Um, she'd sit in a Canadian rocker in the living room, and she would just rock and rock. And I would get her up on occasion. I'd get her up, and I'd hold her hands in front of me, and I would walk her around the living room. She could no longer initiate that on her own, but just to kind of give her some exercise, I'd pick her and I'd just kind of walk her. I'd kind of pull her along and at her tempo, at her speed. And we just kind of walk around a little bit, and she'd sit there and she'd just smile. And the challenge, though, of brushing her teeth, of giving her medications, we'd crush as those medications that we could crush, we'd crush and put it in applesauce and spoon feed her the applesauce. Changing her, feeding her, toileting her, bathing her. Those were challenges that we were facing every day, every week, month after month. And there were times when we were exhausted. I will say this, the last 6 months of her life, we had hospice come in. I can't tell you how important hospice is. And if you are resisting hospice because you're afraid that they're going to be responsible for hastening your mom or your dad or your loved one's death, that's not the case at all. In fact, hospice will come in, and it's between your loved one and God. I've worked in hospice for almost 18 years as a chaplain, and I'll tell you right now, there have been times we've had patients on hospice that went an extra 6 months or an extra year, or we had to release them because they were improving, and then we see them a year after that. So, but the blessing of hospice is that they'll have certified aides come in to give them bed baths or even bathe them in the shower 1, 2, or even sometimes 3 times a week. You'll have a social worker. They work for the hospice. They don't work for the state, and they will look for other resources to help and to be a blessing to you. And then, of course, the chaplains. We come and we offer our prayer and support. Oftentimes, just listening. Listening is very, very important. And so these are benefits. The nurses that come, they're skilled, in hospice care. And so the last 6 months we had hospice coming in, and they were a great help. And some hospices even have volunteers that will come out and give you a break so that you can, go to the store or go out to dinner or spend some time, on your own. It's so important. And whether your loved one's on hospice or not, you need friends. You need the community of a good church or some kind of a social club or neighbors that really care about you. Your well-being, your mental health is extremely important. You cannot give something you don't have, and you're not going to be much of a help to your loved one if you yourself are sick. It's just something that we don't really think about. In the subsequent videos, I'll be talking to you about medications. How much is too much? To be honest with you, most of us probably give less than we should because we've been raised, about watching, medications and not wanting to give too much. And so oftentimes we don't really give enough, but that'll be another video down the road. And just so many different issues that I can't quite remember right now, but I believe that there'll be a benefit to you. If this has really kind of helped you, or perhaps you know of somebody that it would help, just feel free to forward it to them. And it is weekly. And at the end of this video, I'll have my email posted. Please feel free to email me with any questions or comments that you might have. And prayer is so important. In fact, Father, I just ask right now that you would comfort, Lord God, those that are watching this. Lord, I ask, God, that you would help them, God, just to take a deep breath. I thank you, oh Lord, that you are there for us. Lord, even when we feel like we're going to have a panic attack because we just don't know really what to do. I ask, Father, that you would give each and every one of them, Lord God, peace, wisdom, comfort to know, Lord God, that they are not alone. And even though they may physically be alone, I pray, Lord God, that you will reveal yourself to them in a way, God, that they will know that they've got what they need to accomplish the work at hand. And so please be encouraged to know that there are people out here that are very familiar with what you're going through. And don't hesitate to contact me. Lord bless you, and I'll see you next week.